I am Terry Russell, your MPI chapter president, and we're thrilled to welcome you to our session focusing on mental health awareness. Before we start our session, I just want to recognize some of our new members. We have our team from Capilano University. Welcome. And we have Kaja, our independent meeting professional, who just joined us, so thank you very much. And I don't see Gaspard. Is he here? No, he's supposed to be here. But anyhow, it was his 5th anniversary, so we just want to congratulate him. And thank you to our annual sponsors that we have that sustain us this year: Tourism Burnaby, Loungeworks, Helijet, BBW, Foster Walker Gifts of Distinction, Harlow Agency, ePly, MyBadges.com, and Vision Event Photography. We are also pleased to be back at the iconic Pan Pacific Hotel, and we appreciate the sales and catering team for assisting in planning this event for us today. Our programming is also possible due to the generosity of the CVent and MPI Foundation Educational Grant, and a special thank you to the communications team at the BC Pavilion Corporation for recording this session. I am honored to welcome our keynote speaker this morning, Jonathan Morris, CEO with the Canadian Mental Health Association. Jonathan comes back to the Canadian Mental Health Association after almost 2 years in public service, working for the Ministry of Health and Addictions, where he played a key role in building this new ministry from the ground up, eventually leading the policy and legislation branch as senior director. In this role, Jonathan was responsible for providing advice on a range of complex policy and legislative initiatives, while leading several transformational mental and health and addiction programs. Jonathan provided leadership for provincial mental health and substance use operations through the association's provincial office and branch network across British Columbia. His work focused on addressing systemic disparities between physical and mental health, campus mental health, the criminal justice system, system transformation, policy, and government relations. Jonathan has more than 15 years of experience in research and practice, has trained as a counselor, held sessional teaching appointments at the University of Victoria and Douglas College in child and youth care. Please welcome Johnny Morris.
Thanks so much, Terry. I'll just do a little switcheroo. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. It's great to see so many friendly faces here. And this is my first event professional gig, so I feel like I'm in a very well-planned place with lots of folks who really enjoy bringing people together. So it's really lovely to be in this beautiful space with you, and honored, and thanks Vala and Terry for the lovely and warm introduction. And I hope this is an opportunity to do more things together. Can you hear me okay? Is it okay? All good? Great. And are you our recording friend? Are you comfy, peachy keen? Great. Yep. Okay, before we get going, I do want to acknowledge, and I'm still getting used to podiums. Like you've heard all the jokes about Zoom, but I'm still getting used to this thing. So you might see me move around a little bit. Before we get going, really important to acknowledge that today, this morning, we are in unceded ancestral stolen lands, particularly the Tsleil-Waututh, the Musqueam, and the Squamish territories. I'm very grateful to be here on these territories this morning, these beautiful lands, as we have a really important conversation with each other about mental health and well-being. And I think it really stands out, the leadership of MPI, to be having these conversations about mental health, about your mental health. And we've all taken a hit significantly this past number of years. And I'm sure many of you are concerned about the staff, the people on your teams when it comes to their mental health. So thank you for being here, and grateful to be on these territories. I just want to share a little bit about me, and I find this an important thing to do. If any of you were psychotherapists, you could interpret this picture in a lot of ways. This is me here on the beach, doing my own things with my dad and my sister. This gets posted every year on my birthday by my father, and he makes some kind of quip about me being a bit of a loner, a bit of kind of do it my own way, build sandcastles on my own. But that's little old me when I was about 4. Where I come from with this work, and I think it's really important. I'm not just an expert in mental health who's come to stand with you today. I'm someone who comes with lived experience. So myself, I live with depression. I've lived with depression for about 20 years. And it was an experience that actually almost thwarted me from finishing university. I came here as an immigrant from the UK when I was 18. I really wanted to be a marine biologist. I'd watched Flipper as a kid, fell in love with the west coast of Canada, and really, really wanted to get into working with marine life, and I ended up in mental health care. So that's a big switch from marine life to mental health care. But a big part of my journey as an international student at UVic was one of discombobulation. It was really, really tough to adapt to a new life in a different country, even though I'd come from the United Kingdom. And I remember really struggling in my first and my second year of university. And to the point where some of my friends call it the lost year. They didn't see me because I was experiencing such a depression at the time. They didn't interact with me. They were worried about me. And so at that time, a big part of the difference was a conversation. It was a life-changing conversation with someone who cared about me, a professor, who pulled me to one side and did the skills that we're going to walk through this morning and moved me the 2 to 3 degrees I needed to be able to get help. And I was really privileged to be able to get support from a counselor. Part of our fight at the CMHA is to make more resources available. But I just wanted to share that bit about me, that I'm coming to you today with lived experience, and I bet almost 100% of the people in this room have been touched in some way by mental ill health, whether it be someone you love, someone you care about, you yourself. And I just want to know you are seen today, this morning, with whatever experiences you bring around mental health. I also have a family member in my life who lives with severe and persistent mental illness too. And so the current reality, we often used to talk about 1 in 5 of us being impacted. In so many ways, it's 5 in 5 now. It's really all of us who are impacted in some way. So I just wanted to share that little bit about me. Also, that each of you, as leaders in the have an opportunity to support life-changing. You don't have to become a psychiatrist to help someone move a few degrees to get someone with influence over someone's life. You can make a real difference in that person getting care. So a little bit about us. It's very small text, but how many of you know about the CMHA? Okay, we've got to get our social media going too. So sometimes we're confused with the CMHC, which is the Canadian Mortgage and Housing. We're not, yes, or the CMA, the Canadian Medical Association. We don't have anything to do with mortgages or interest rates or anything like that. But we've actually been around a long time in this country. We were established in 1918, so we're one of the oldest charities in this country, oldest, most established, and far-reaching. And we serve thousands of people, about 100,000 people each year here in British Columbia, and probably in excess of 1 million people across the country through our services and programs. And we're really focused on 3 things: education and training, so that's why Val brought me in today. How do we raise awareness about mental illness, mental health, mental well-being? How do we get you to be empowered to support people? We provide a lot of service. We have free service that we can point you to. We have free programs that people can access, many of which are translated into different languages to reflect the diversity of BC. And we also do a lot of policy and advocacy. So part of our effort is to fight for a better system of care. And currently, I think you'd all agree, in Canada, we have lots of healthcare problems, but mental health care still remains a significant barrier for people. People have to wait, people have to pay, so that's part of the fight that we take on as a charity in this country. So before I just give you an outline of what we're going to do, and I'm not going to talk at you for 90 minutes, a part of my style is really trying to support you to have conversations amongst yourselves. We're going to talk about mental health today. We're going to talk about mental ill health. And for many of you, it might stir things in your lives. You might be supporting someone right now. You might be going through your own challenges around mental health and well-being. Just some resources here if you need any immediate support today, and I'll hang out for a little bit afterwards if you want to touch base, but just some resources that are available. These are crisis line resources here in the province, and they're available and free for you if you need them. So before I actually put you into your tables to have a conversation amongst yourselves, which hopefully feels okay, these are the 3 things that we're going to take a look at this morning. What do we mean by mental health? Like, what does that look like in your workplaces? What does it mean if someone is in distress in your workplaces? So that's a bit of a conversation we're going to have this morning. What does it mean to be mentally healthy and well? All of us have mental health. All of you have mental health and well-being. What does this look like as a supervisor? All of us have legal responsibilities, and we won't get into a lot of that this morning, but we all have a legal responsibility around how we support and accommodate people in our workplaces. But I think what Valai asked me to do is how do you show up as people leaders? And for many of us, it's really difficult to have these conversations if you're worried. If you're a boss and you've got someone in your team and you're worried about, it can feel a bit scary to have that conversation. You know you've got to have that conversation. We're going to support you with some skills this morning to enable you to do that well. And where can you learn more? We want to be a partner with MPI and support you as event professionals and members of the industry to feel as confident as possible around mental health in the workplace. And we're here with lots of free resources to support you in that effort. Does this sound like a good use of the first part of your sunny Thursday morning? Absolutely. Okay, great. So the first thing, which I think is always good to get the ice going and get us warmed up, is for you to have a chat amongst yourselves. We're not doing therapy this morning. I can refer you to lots of really good therapists if you like. But we are going to talk at kind of global terms. There's no expectation for any of you to share anything personal today. But what I'd like you to do at your tables, and I'm glad there's a few more with the Capilano crew who've joined, so I'm glad you've got a few more folks at your table. These are 3 questions I just want you to have a chat at your table with each other about, just privately. As a group, you might want to talk as a pair or as a table. What are your big questions about mental health in the workplace? You know, what are your big questions? What keeps you up at night, if it does keep you up at night? Where do you feel most confident as a leader, as a company owner, as someone in the workplace? Where do you feel most confident on this issue? And where do you want to learn a bit more? So those are 3 questions I just want you to chat at your table for a few minutes about. And then we'll come back and popcorn style, just see where you're at with these questions. Does that sound okay? Great. So I'll see you in about 5 to 7 minutes. Have a chat. Okay, and I figured out how to work the microphone, so that was a win. That's a win for Thursday. So I wandered around and I try not to eavesdrop, but I was just so struck by how quickly you as tables, which is no surprise, you're brilliant humans, how you got so quickly to some of the crux of these issues, right? And just to get things going, I heard balance between personal and professional. Like, where is that line between you balancing someone's performance, their struggle with a problem of some kind, your accountabilities as a supervisor, and making sure they feel cared about. There's tricky complexity there, right? So does any table want to kind of venture an observation or a theme? Isabella, hello. Hi. And so, Isabella, your table's identifying like power is very real. It's a big deal for an employee to raise their hand and say, I'm depressed, because you can perceive your job's on the line. Am I going to be passed over for my next promotion? And that theme around power and who you feel safe. You might feel safe going to one person, but they might actually not have the power to do anything. So you have to go to someone else, and all of that in our workplaces too, right? Relationship and trust and the stigma at play there too. So thanks for getting us going, Isabella. Anyone want to build on Isabella's comments? Hi, Valai. Well, and I think these are linked, right? And today I want you to leave feeling satiated with some solutions at your fingertips. And there are ways within workplaces to minimize these pieces. So today we're not going to get into psychological safety as much, but the more you create across an organization, the less likely you're going to have employees go, oh, where's Johnny? He's been off for 3 weeks. He's been grumpy. Is he depressed? Now I've got to pick up his workload. And then you have other dynamics taking place in your workplace. And to your earlier point, Isabella, how do you maybe structure places of safe harbor so that there are places for people to disclose? Like a lot of workplaces have moved into peer support. So people who are identified as safe people to talk to, with ways to get decisions made around leaves through HR and that kind of thing. So we can talk some more of that. But those are real challenges, Valai, around you've got a bottom line to manage. That's real. It's not going anywhere. And how do you meet your legal and your moral obligations around accommodating? Any other responses from you?
We feel confident about giving days off.
Terry, say a bit more. Like, where does that confidence come from? Like, that's an interesting point.
Well, just, I mean, I think we've all seen people where you're just getting, I hope that you see people getting to the point, like, give them permission. Have them taking a day off. I mean, how many people look at we look at the stats about how Americans especially don't take vacation days. No wonder they're wound up so tight. I mean, people need to take.
It's a Canadian problem too, I think.
Take time off, a couple of hours even.
Yeah. Well, and normalizing that. So balancing the trade-off, right, between, people exploiting that a bit much, or, in our workplace, we have mental health days. So you don't have to raise your hand to say, I'm having a mental health. It's the same. It's treated the same. People could just say, I'm having a mental health, and no questions asked, and it's kind of built in. Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of people are moving that way. So I think depending on your culture in an organization, some find it helpful to be overt, and name it, and because it creates some safety. But we've moved over our time. It's just like if you're experiencing any kind of health condition, physical or it's a wellness day. Yeah, take your day. Well, and how many of you would agree with the comment how many of you have virtual or hybrid work? Like some staff you never see, right? They're at home. I have quite a few of you. So there's this compounded worry of the person who might be declining and you don't know until there's a crisis. And then the folks who are completely removed from view, the staff on my team of 150, I haven't seen in 3 years. So I rely on my managers to lay eyes on them. But if you've got a remote workforce, and so that's key, right? We can be really proactive, and we'll get into this today with people who are exhibiting signs of distress. But you're totally right. What do we do about the person who we discover, and they're at the wit's end and it's a crisis situation? So, well, and all of those features around trust, being aware, being able to have a conversation. Like if Johnny's at home, he's been remote for 6 months, his performance is declining. It's to set up the Zoom meeting, to have the conversation is different than, pulling Johnny into the office to have a chat at the end of the day, right? So we have to really think about mental health in the workplace very differently now, Paul, given your comment, because we have obligations for the people who are remote and virtual, and how do we get them connected so that we can have some of these more difficult conversations about mental health? So that's a great point, Paul. Hard work, safe spaces, is that what you said? Or was that what I said? Oh, okay. We were just simpatico there. That was good. I liked what you said. I thought that was a good campaign. That was good. I'll just skip through a couple of pieces and we'll break out into groups. I just want to normalize that 41%, so almost half of the Canadian population have reported a decline in their mental health since the start of the pandemic. This is our data built in partnership with the University of British Columbia. We were one of the first agencies to collect data through the pandemic, and we did 4 waves of data collection. And so 41%. Vulnerable populations, hardest hit, so people living with a mental health condition. But can you take some guesses about other populations that were very hard hit mental health-wise during the pandemic? The event industry. The event industry.
If you live in a remote community, or
yeah. Yeah, so racialized folks, including Indigenous folks, the LGBT community, folks who are historically excluded or vulnerability, absolutely, they actually had more of a decline in their mental health. Yeah, so people in the student world, we got some universities represented here, international students. Like for learners, their whole way of learning, just like for event professionals, turned completely upside down. And it's just to normalize this. This is why it's no longer 1 in 5. It's probably 1 in 3 because of the pandemic. Any other populations you think were hard hit? Teenagers, yeah. Seniors, parents, in our data, parents off the charts with mental health decline, and also alcohol use. And earlier this week, we all learned that any amount of alcohol is actually pretty dangerous at this point, but alcohol use went straight up. And women, people who self-identify as women very, very significantly impacted their mental health. Any idea why? Kids, so there's a whole reset in those stresses and responsibilities, being at home whilst juggling, caregiving, raising children, all of those pieces. Now, this translates into the workplace, right? So 70% of Canadian employees are concerned about the psychological safety and health in their workplace. That's staggering, right? 70% of Canadians are worried that the safety around their psychological health and safety is unsafe. Do you think this statistic would fly if 70% of Canadians were worried about physical safety, like trip hazards, chemical spills, accidents? It wouldn't fly. There'd be WorkSafe investigations galore, right? We haven't quite got to that equity yet, but to me that's a very staggering statistic that over 2/3 of Canadians feel unsafe in their workplace. And for many of you who handle bottom line issues like short-term disability or long-term disability as business owners or publicly funded companies, the driver for mental health is also incredibly significant. So 70% of your disability costs in a workplace are mental health related. And 30 to 40% of mental health, short-term claims are mental health related, and 30% of long-term disability. And at that point, you're not getting that person back into the workplace quite often, right? So real opportunities to prevent. If you're managing bottom lines, there are ways that these statistics can get changed. These are not inevitable statistics. There's things we can do in the workplace. You know, to your point, Val, proactive disability management, instead of waiting for the employee, not to say this was, it's not a critique of you, Val, at all, but that balance between intervening in someone's life to structure return or waiting for them to say, how much more time do I have, can have a real bearing on return rate, right? So, well, actually, I'll just pause before I show that, and I've got a little video to share. How would you define mental health? Like, we use mental health interchangeably. Sometimes when we say mental health, we mean mental illness. Sometimes we mean well-being. Like, what does mental health mean to you as a group of amazing humans? What does it mean to have mental health? Yeah, good, yeah. However you interpret it. What does good mental health mean to you? Yeah, so feeling some sense of control of your well-being. Balance, that's a key word. So the good baseline, you're not you're not unbalanced in the sense of how you're doing, how you're in control of how you're feeling. That's a great comment. What else does mental health mean to you? State of being, and that's true, very true. A state of being, a state of experience. Thank you.
Motivated.
Feeling motivated, so energy, motivation, that's a component of mental health. Feeling an ability to stay positive, great. What does mental ill health mean to you as a group of amazing humans? What does ill health or illness mean? Yes, we superimpose a lot of expectation on what's normal, but your own ability to decide what's a normal level of functioning and where things are straying is really key. What else in mental ill health? Yeah, I mean, we all have worries typically, but when that starts to take over how we live, or it kind of gets out of control, like the worries get out of control, that's a clue that something might be up. Withdrawing, social isolation. So we'll come back to these pieces because these are clues or indicators that you can see in your own workplaces, right? These are some of the things. It's trickier for, as you said, for the person who's under the radar, right? But these are some of the things that you can spot in your workplace. So this is just one example, and you're all mental health experts. Look at this. I'll be out of a job. A state of well-being in which individuals realize their own potential, so their own state of functioning, can cope, back to your comment earlier, with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, fruitfully, and make a contribution. Like, people might tear this to pieces, because what does it mean across different spaces and places? But it's the World Health Organization. And so this is something we all have a right to, we all have a relationship with, and it's something you can really support your employees to have as well. I'm just going to play a short video. There's a great resource online called Workplace Mental Health Strategies. And this is a couple of accounts of employees in the workplace. So these are pretty recent, 2019. People describing their experience of distress as workers in their respective workplaces. So we'll just see how this goes.
I think I was still trying to laugh and smile with people because you didn't want people to know that you were not feeling well. And
okay.
I did everything that I was supposed to do, basically, I think. But you put up, I don't even know how to explain it. It's just something you work with. It's just, okay, I have to do this and this is what I do. So I go into work and I do what I have to do. If I make an error, I found it. I never got in trouble. But the focusing was not there. The communication was not there. You know, you're not in a bubble basically, but you're just within yourself. That's how I can basically describe it.
The ability to own if I have made a mistake is extremely difficult for me. And partly because I have the sense I have to be better than everybody else, because I have this condition, and because I have to push through so much, that there's an expectation that I actually function at a higher level than other people.
I felt very stressed, very frustrated. I felt like my manager doesn't like me. Everybody is picking on me, and I was getting angry inside me, feeling kind of screaming at everything out. And I said, no, this is not me. It's just the anxiety that's doing it. But you feel that way because of the anxiety and the mental health you have.
When I do feel so full of self-doubt that I can't speak up, even if I have an idea, I won't share it. Or in the context of work, if I'm working on a report or developing content, or I'll procrastinate because I just won't trust what I have to say or how I'm interpreting things is correct or good enough.
My boss has benefited from me trying to hide my mental health challenges by overworking myself. But here's where the death would have come in, because I'd go 3 days no sleep. I'd have people in satellite sites across Ontario and Quebec that I'm double checking their work because there's no confidence. And so that kind of hamster on the wheel kind of approach eventually would be what led to them finding me either one morning at home or in the office over my desk.
So as you see those stories from workers, and I know the volume is a bit low there. Just hearing, these are real life people. They're not actors. They're not paid actors. They're in workers. As you heard those stories, where did it take you in your own experiences? You've heard, they weren't using words like I'm depressed or I have bipolar illness, but they're describing their experience of living with a mental health struggle in the workplace. Where did it take you? What did it do to you to hear those stories? Relatable. Yeah, could you say a bit more? That's powerful. What do you mean? Well, and what you're describing here, the comments, that's empathy in action. That's empathy in action because you're going behind the story, right? So you're able to move beyond the first set of behaviors and go, well, what's driving this? What's underneath this? And your language around, well, the anxiety is driving this. And how it can distort perception, both of the person who's anxious, but also the people around them. People might go, oh, this person's so irritating, or why don't they ever speak up in meetings? So you've just gone beyond that, and we'll get to this skill of empathy shortly. You've been able to go behind, you're listening to understand. Living with a mental health problem like anxiety, where speaking up you can be physically, there's people who before a job interview, or they live with such profound anxiety that it results in something that feels like a heart attack, right? A panic attack. And so I hear you, like there's different levels, and it can, how do we create workplaces where irrespective of whether you're living with anxiety, you can feel safe to raise your hand and speak up? What do you think's behind that? What causes? I remember internalizing it. It was really hard to speak out when I was 22, and because I was worried about getting kicked out of school for being depressed. But what's behind that kind of internalizing? Why do people end up blaming themselves for a health condition? Like we're talking about health conditions here. Stigma, right, Heidi? And it's Heidi, right? Yeah, stigma. Judgment. Absolutely. Self-doubt. Yeah, how many of you, well, I had self-doubt this morning. I was going to go, Valai's not going to like this. She's never going to invite me back. She's probably mad with me because I'm bringing the slides. I didn't send them a week ago. I'm a bad CEO. All of that ran through my head over my cup of tea this morning, right? And I'm pretty functioning and I'm okay, right? But we convince ourselves, all of us, and for some folks, that kind of can run quite quickly and quite high and be quite debilitating too. But to your beautiful comment about, and I really appreciate you sitting with that, think about your roles as bosses, supervisors, owners, and what you can do to dismantle some of what's pushing people to internalize. Heidi's comment about empathy. That's so powerful, right? You still need the job to be done, right, Heidi? But you're not going to push me away if you sit me down and go, Johnny, you haven't been showing up on time to meetings. You've been a bit withdrawn. I'm worried. Can we chat this through? That's a door opener. You haven't fired me. You've opened the door. So I think there's lots of things you can all do in the spaces you control in your workplaces to really respond to that powerful point that you made there. How do we avoid people internalizing? Because there's a whole world out there that's pretty judgy and stigmatizing of people with mental illness, right? But you have control over the spheres you work in. Absolutely. I mean, for me, it took a pretty stern letter at 22 years old. Johnny, your future in this program's a bit questionable right now because I was so... It did take some external forces around me to go, okay, I'm safe enough to ask for help. And that was a pretty extreme example in my life. But I hear you, that there is that balance between consent, someone being able to identify what they're going through, and also being willing to engage. And there's this idea of, many of us are pre-contemplative, right? We can be in this space of going, I'm going to make this change, I'm going to do this thing, right through to action. And we can go backwards and forwards on that scale. And it sounds like your colleague is in a space of being pretty pre-contemplative or contemplative about seeking help. And we all sit on that change readiness scale, right? Part of the trick is, without becoming the therapist for this person, is how do we just hold space for someone to move along to maybe help seeking. We can't force people. So that's a really powerful point. It's a two-way street. And there's a whole spectrum of that too. There's in one area, actually simply not understanding symptoms, right? Not understanding what's happening, because we don't do a lot of mental health education in school. So we know if our heart's behaving funnily or if we're experiencing something, we know to go and seek help. But sometimes with mental health symptoms, we might be sleeping a lot, or we just might chalk it up to something and actually not recognize, because we don't have the understanding. And through to people who don't have insight into illness, absolutely, like people who might not understand or accept that they actually have a diagnosis. So that can be a really challenging space to sit as family members, and then also in the workplace. I really appreciate that contribution. So I'm going to break you into groups again, and I appreciate everything that's been shared so far. And I just want you to think through, we've already talked a little bit about this, but as people leaders or colleagues, I really would love for you to chat amongst yourselves about some of the early signs, not the crisis signs, but some of the early signs that you pick up as intuitive humans that someone might be challenged or distressed. What are some of the things you might pick up? Most importantly, for the learning this morning is how do you feel when you see those early signs? What comes up in you? We won't be asking for you to personally disclose much there. What are you worried about? And in that moment, what do you feel inclined to do? Sometimes I feel inclined to run, and I'm a mental health professional. Like I feel inclined, I can't do this today. I just cannot do this. Sometimes I want to lean in. But curious to see how it sits with you in those I think of the story, the conversation you shared. You were out of the work environment, you were at dinner or out for drinks. How you felt in those moments of supporting someone is really important learning, because it drives your behavior. If you want to bolt, you're likely going to bolt in what you say. You're going to say, well, get it handed in next week, figure it out, pull up your bootstraps. Not a helpful response. So take that for 5 to 7 minutes, and we'll come back in a mo. So just before we move into the final piece, because we do wrap up at 10 this morning, and today is an introduction, right, to hopefully more conversations like this, because there's lots more to this than the 3 skills we'll go over in a sec. But just briefly, in response to these questions, I overheard some really rich conversations. Wherever you want to go, you might want to pick any of these 3. What kinds of themes came up for you about noticing how you feel? What do you feel inclined to do? Hi, hello? Yeah. Well, and that's an inverse of what you said earlier about knowing your own functioning, knowing your own team's functioning, again, with boundaries and bits and pieces in place. You're not going to know the intimate details of someone's lives, but having a good sense of your team. And back to Paul's comment earlier, it's hard in a virtual environment. Like, how do we have some folks you might never have met as you onboard them, but knowing your teams well is so key. not arriving to too quick conclusions without knowing. But one thing that, and I overheard it over here, that I've held true over 30 years in this space, or however long I've been doing this, is if there's something changing on the outside, if you're noticing something changing, chances are there's something happening on the inside too, like just noticing some of those shifts. Are you going to ask questions after one day of noticing a shift? Maybe not. Maybe, yeah, patterns. And that's key, right, Heidi? Patterns, noticing patterns over time. And you're only going to notice those patterns over time if you've got a good cadence and sense of your team, right? A good pulse on your team. And that's your role as a people leader. What else came up for folks here? The biggies are withdrawal. So you've got a motivated team player, suddenly a shift there around energy, engagement. Yeah, and there could be lots of reasons for that, right? But it's a prompt, right, Heidi? There's a marked shift where you're like, is something happening in this person's life? Particularly if you're noticing it connecting with withdrawal or performance shifts. Those are some clues, right? Any others that folks might suggest? I've got a few more I could rattle off. Irritability is a big deal. Like if someone's pretty even-keeled. I know my mood's starting to go if I'm pretty, you hopefully can tell, pretty easygoing, not quick to anger. But if I'm getting grumpy or if I know my moods, and this time of year is really hard on my mood. It's a tough time with light here. So irritability and anger, a personal appearance, withdrawal. You know, you might not be able to pick up on sleep and appetite, but those are things that others might pick up, like big changes in sleep and appetite. That's often an indicator that something's up. You know, sometimes it's not often that we see psychosis start in the workplace. It's a rare event, but you know, noticing behaviors that seem out of the norm, can also be a clue. But all of this is change on the outside, right? These are signs and symptoms mainly of depression. I'm describing anxiety. You know, people describing panic. People kind of coming to do their performance appraisal and then bolting. It's out of character, panic, anxiety, those kinds of things. Any other things you might pick up on? Yeah, so someone, and those are quite rare too, but someone kind of really feeling, you know, we all daydream and we all kind of look out the window. I just had a daydream over there. But, you know, disassociating and disconnecting from the present is sometimes a sign. In our workplace, we often have people with experiences of trauma, right? So they come into our workplaces with trauma, and sometimes things in the workplace can trigger a trauma response. And many of us have had experiences of trauma, whether it be a motor vehicle accident or other kinds of trauma throughout our lives. I think, to the comment made earlier, knowing your team and being prepared for the answer you might get. And so I've seen it done in space where it's a good, I think before even that kind of check-in, normalizing open door policies, creating, you know, an atmosphere where we can talk about how we're doing generally without kind of getting into lots and lots of detail. Kind of some of the because then people know the boundary a little bit. Like I've been in spaces where people don't know the boundary and they share an incredibly triggering story in the context of your so your 10-minute check-in before you're about to launch into your business forecast. And that's tough. Like, how do you pull that back? There are ways, but you do want to create a space where people can show up as their full human self. We bring our brains, minds, hearts, bodies to work. So those kinds of stresses, that's pretty innocuous, right? And you could frame the question, and that models sharing, it models disclosure, it models you as a boss are listening and attending, especially with how you respond to those pieces. I think it can be powerful as long as you know your team well. You've set some boundaries about what's going to be helpful to share, and you've got a broader workplace that values well-being writ large, right? Tech Resources, big mining company, they've done beautiful work with their crew teams, their miners in the mines, like predominantly men, normalizing disclosure, talking about stuff, health and well-being, and it's been incredibly powerful because then people go, okay, I'm going to tell my boss this is what's happening. So normalizing that, I think, is helpful, just within boundaries, I think. Did that help, Heidi? Yeah. Any other responses to this? Does anyone feel inclined, and no shame here, this is a safe space, but does anyone feel inclined to kind of run for the hills in these moments? I do sometimes, yeah.
I think there's always let's see how this thing looks next week.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I would just really try, like I've already got a good sense of this room. What a lovely group of people, Val. You're people. So would be a different and not to stereotype, it's a different conversation in different industries, right? And not to generalize, but you're intuitive folks, I can already tell. And so I overheard you saying, at what point, you've punted it to the next week because you're just waiting to see it play out. At what point do you have to step in? And your intuition is a big part of this, like following your gut, I think is pretty powerful to go, it's been 2 weeks. It's now time for me to inquire. And we all actually have a legal duty to inquire. If someone's work performance is being impacted by what you suspect to be a mental health related problem, there is a duty to inquire. And there's a whole legal session we can do with you because that's important around what your duty is around inquiry and accommodation. There's rules that we have to follow. Which leads me to we're on the home stretch. We could just spend the whole day together here. I'd like that, knowing what I've got to head back to. So that would be fun. So what I want to do here is just kind of give you three basic, and it is basic. There's no rocket science in here, but just some reminders, because I think sometimes we forget some basics in the moment. And then I'm not going to run through, I'm going to share the deck with Valai. We actually have a free multi-level curriculum for the tourism and hospitality industry. We'd love to open up for you as people. Particularly the more senior classes, like there's a whole bunch that we can really do over a few hours around manager conversations, but also for owners, VPs, CEOs, how do you change the culture in your workplace? So there's a national standard we can actually help you implement in your workplace, and you actually don't have to pay a penny. It's free, it's funded by the province, so we can... Sorry, I'm not good at this. I'm feeling judged with my microphone skills. Yes, well, I'll show you at the very end. So we have it's called CARE, and it's called the CARE certificate. And we actually have 3 levels we can run you through for free, completely for free, no sales pitch. And we'd love to have folks in here. So I'll give you a taste of that once I've run through these skills. So these are the things you have to do. And we've just covered all of this morning. We haven't gone into the legal side because there's importance around having a lawyer, not little Johnny, talking that through. Because there's legal things you have to follow. Thanks. I love you too, Isabella. It's mutual. But we can absolutely support. There's really good legal firms in the part. We have good relationships we can support your membership with. But we've already covered point 2. You are smart, intuitive, insightful people. Like I'm leaving this morning thinking this group knows when someone's struggling, that you intuitively know or you know from what you're seeing. We want to support you to improve your comfort and confidence when approaching an employee. And the key part we're going to bridge into next is how to support. So there's 3 skills, no rocket science here. These skills, as a CEO of a multi-large, huge charity with 120 staff, these are the 3 things I do every day with my staff when I'm worried. And I work in an industry where people are drawn to this work, people like me who live with a mental health problem because they care about making change, right? So these skills have kept me going for my entire career of being able to ask, being able to listen, and knowing when it's time to refer and connect someone to the right kind of help. And it's back to that boundaries piece. And to your earlier comment, that person's got to be in a place of wanting to do something, wanting to go there, and that can be tricky at times. So ask, listen, refer are the basic skills. And these are some things here, and I just want to probe for a moment here. So if you've noticed someone, one of the hardest things to do at times is, especially if you're a supervisor, is to ask what's happening, this first skill. For me, that was life-changing. I remember sitting in that office with my professor, and he said, what's going on? And that was the 3 degrees I needed to move into it. It was a long journey, but it was very powerful. So thinking about all that we've talked about, and I'm thinking of your comment about safety too, event safety, because safety is part of this as well. Are there signs of distress in the workplace where you're more comfortable intervening? For example, if someone's been late repeatedly, maybe their appearance has changed, and you've picked up this pattern over a couple of weeks, is that a conversation you feel? Heidi, you're so candid, I love it. Did you all hear Heidi's response? It was no. Have you, over your career, have you figured out yet, Heidi, how to pull it back from it going to disciplinary so quickly? It's such a fine line. And I think all I can offer you in 90 minutes, as we've spent today, is to decouple where you can, right? And it's hard. There's much more that we can do together around supporting that tightrope walk of your legal obligations as an employer, your human, how are you doing, can I help you, and that performance disciplinary side. It is difficult. So much I think is born out of the relationship, the context of the work environment, what the person's handling, and finding a way to be as early in the intervention as possible so that defensiveness doesn't come up. And there's no magic solution to that. Like Vali, the situation you described earlier, complicated, right? We haven't figured out some of the difficulty, but the fact that you're inquiring might lower the risk of a need for accommodation. Getting to someone early in their journey lowers the risk of a short-term disability or long-term disability claim. Finding a way to kind of say, well, what do you need around resources? Do you need to take some time? Can we connect you to EFAP, all those kinds of pieces? And then bringing in performance later. And that's something we can absolutely offer, like the finest skills of performance, accommodation, inquiry, we can absolutely support you with. And I appreciated your comment earlier, whatever we can do to avoid internalizing these pieces is key, because probably the illness, that defensiveness, might be linked to the person's experience of illness, right? And being non-punctual might have absolutely nothing to do with mental health. It might actually be someone's just, which is a performance issue. Like if someone's habitually late and there's no presenting collateral around depression, anxiety, that might just be, hey, show up in time, this is your third warning. Like it might just be pure basic bad performance, being late. And don't forget that, like this is a conversation about mental health, but some people, sometimes perform badly because they don't have the skill. That's not a mental health issue, they don't care, they don't give a hoot. They're just quiet quit. They might be quietly quitting, whatever that means. So always remember bad performance, and there is bad performance, might absolutely have sweet nothing to do with mental health. You just might have an employee that might need to be transitioned, But under law, that's why I said transitioned. And I'm remembering this is being recorded. So, and again, that situation may have absolutely nothing to do with mental health and well-being. Might simply be, someone who's behaving badly, or, as you're saying, spotting these patterns early. And it's hard. Back to Paul's very sage commentary earlier, like how you do this in this virtual world where that relational capital we used to have is eroding. And I think those are really important things to get on top of, right, early on. I'm not going to linger here too long, but I do think, that decoupling it, like if you're convinced that performance is being impacted by a health condition, and some of this could be medical, right? It could be someone's thyroid is actually causing them, it could be purely medical, thyroid, medical condition, impacting performance. These are just some prompts like, hi there, I'm getting the sense you may be feeling overwhelmed right now. What can I do to help? How are you doing today? Avoiding, even though I'm a trained counselor person, I love giving advice. It's been hard to train out. Like you don't want to leap to solutions. We're going to send you to EFAP. We're going to get you the crisis line number. We're going to get you all sorted out. Make sure you go. That's not going to be very helpful. So, asking, listening, saying things like, just calm down. For someone who's experiencing a panic attack, probably the worst thing you can do, calm down. It's not going to work. But if someone, trying to build that relationship on Zoom, it's very tricky, but relying on the skills you all have as people, like I can feel it in this room, to ask in a simple way, don't assume what they need, and figure out if you're the boss and you're standing over them saying, Johnny, are you depressed? Not helpful. And these are basics that people might be like, Johnny, really? You're coming here for 90 minutes to say this? The number of people leaders, including myself, who struggle with this at times, hopefully it lands in a good way as a really important skill and can be life-changing. And sometimes, particularly if suicide's in the workplace, life-saving. Like this can be life-saving for people as well. And we can support that around suicide prevention in work sites as well. Heidi could do a masterclass on empathy, so that's coming. We'll sign Heidi up. So you're a judgy empath. So listening is so key. So if you're concerned about employee and you're about to head into your budget meeting and you're asking 5 minutes before the budget meeting starts, not well timed. So making sure you got the space, the time. Some of this will be virtual, some of it will be in person. But just listening, like really truly sitting with someone and listening, and it's clear to me you're all very good listeners, is an underrated skill. Like listening is so powerful. In these busy lives we lead with tweets and email distractions and meetings, back-to-back meetings, listening can feel in short supply. But even 50 minutes of going, Valai, I'm worried about you. I've noticed there's been a shift in how you've been at work lately. I'm concerned. Is there anything we can talk about so I can help you? I've got the time. Let's talk it through, or book the time. Will go a long way for Valai in helping her feel heard. What does empathy look like in practice? We don't have time this morning. This is a dated Brené Brown short, and then when we send the slides, I encourage you to play it. It's really cute about what empathy can look like and how you can really, as Heidi indicated earlier, listen to understand. You're not listening to manage. You're not listening to fix. You're not listening to discipline. You're listening to understand. Not to be the therapist, but as Heidi did so brilliantly earlier, are you a therapist by any chance? No, too judgy. Oh, 2 teenagers, that's good. But listening to understand and not fix, just holding space. You don't need to be the therapist, but you need a little bit of detail so you can make informed decisions about, do you need to look in accommodation? Do you need to refer to help? So listening to understand, and what's behind, what's behind is a really important skill. So when you get this PowerPoint, you can play this little link with Brené Brown. It's pretty cool. And then these pieces I think you're pretty good at. We were going to get you to practice. Next time, Heidi, we could do a role play. You could sit up here and you could be the listener. But I encourage you at some point today with a friend or a colleague. It sounds like you did this at dinner last night. You were listening to your colleague. I think these are really important skills to practice. Try it out today with your teenagers. See if you can spend 50 minutes deeply listening to your teenager's day. See how that goes. And then refer. So just as we get close to the time here, your role is not to become a comprehensive mental health support system for this person. Your job is to listen, perform your duties as a supervisor, and refer folks to other available resources. And when you get this slide deck, you're going to see 2 QR codes. I'm really proud that I'm using QR codes now. And you can do this right now. Oh, look, early adopter at that table. Very good. Well done. Well done. I put them probably too close together, so I'm feeling a bit judged now probably about my QR code placement. But over here, you'll navigate to our website, and we're updating our website, but you'll see lots of free resources there. Bounce Back's a resource you can refer your staff to. It's people-powered coaching, free, completely free, for depression, stress, and anxiety. It's a cognitive behavioral therapy program. We've been doing it for years. Bounce Back. You can find that on our website. You don't need a doctor to get referred in, and we have multilingual support. So we have Punjabi resources and also resources in Chinese. So that's completely free. And it's a really great program because there's a person walking alongside you around stress, mood, and anxiety. And on the right is a link to a new resource from the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions, wellbeing.gov. And they've got a really navigable resource. You can just pop in what you're looking for, and it's a pretty cool brand new website that they've launched that you can check out too. How many of you have EFAP programs in your workplaces, employee family assistance? Yeah. Do you find them well used? Yeah. And how many of you have benefits plans that provide? Yeah, some of you. Oh, there's 2 hands there. 2 hands. Do you have 2 plans for 2 hands or just 1 plan? Oh, wow, that's like 3 plans. Very cool, Paul. Oh, they do, hey. And Van City here has just gone for $10,000 of psych health each year. Bell's Unlimited. Yes, totally. So that's great to hear. And we've increased ours. And so if you do have any control over your benefits plans, most of us recognize that the typical $500 probably gets you as far as, hi therapists, this is my problem.
Do I even want to have a relationship with you?
And do I even want to have a relationship with you? And it takes more than five. And unfortunately, we have to pay for a lot of that piece. So take a look at that. We'll give you the slides too. This is me on LinkedIn too, if you want to add me. I'm going to stop here because Terry stood up and hand the microphone to Terry. But was this okay for you this morning? Was that good? Yeah.
No, thank you so much, Johnny. It's great to have you here. Does anybody else have any other questions for Johnny, though, while he's here? I mean, obviously you can go up and see him afterwards, but does anybody else have any other questions? You definitely provided some thought-provoking discussion today, and I know we can all use it in our daily lives as well as our work environment. And your dedication to the profession is very admirable and critical to our society today. So with that, on behalf of our MPI BC chapter and our sponsor, Marty Foster Walker gives a distinction. Is this here? I don't know. Oh, I was like pulling out something from underneath. And I was like, here you go.
Oh, that's so kind.
Thank you so much. It was lovely having you here. Thank you so much. And just moving forward, we have our AGM at the Hyatt Regency Vancouver on February 15th. We have special guest Ryan Walter, who is from the Canucks alumni. He might need to go back to the Canucks. I think he might need some help there. And he will be talking about personal and leadership development. March 5th to the 7th, I know I'll be there. If you want to join my colleagues from the MPI Washington and Oregon chapters, we'll be at the Cascadia Education Conference at the Semiahmoo Resort. We have a great lineup of speakers. We have the tech guru, James Spellos, Tahira and Dean, who is locally from here, who is now head of events for IMEX America. And the two legal ladies, Lisa Summer Devlin and Barbara Dunn, will also be there, and of course, many more. And then on March 30th, we'll be joining forces with the PCMA chapter for Global Meeting Industry Day. So thank you very much for coming today. Please see Johnny if you have any other questions, but thank you so much for coming today. Thank you so much. Bye.